You are listening to the Franchise Growth Catalyst Podcast with Angela Coté. Now, go be awesome.
Hey there, Angela Coté here, Franchise Growth Catalyst, and welcome to the very first episode of the Franchise Growth Catalyst Podcast. You might be wondering, why a podcast? Well, if you've been following me on social media, you'll probably notice I've been putting out videos where I share my insights and tips about franchising and business growth through videos and articles. And, engagement has really been on the rise. And so I thought it might make sense to have a more structured forum where I can share my insights and provide tips for my audience and try to help franchisors be more strategic about where they're spending their time, money, and energy. I also really like the idea of having an opportunity to invite my clients or other guests on to share what they're learning and share things that they're doing that are having big impact for them. And, if you've been following me on social media, you probably know that one of my key messages to people is that it's better to do something than to do nothing. And so here I am, I'm walking the talk and literally talking the talk. And really, I'm going to have to have a shout out to Jack Munson of Social Geek Radio to really thank him for the encouragement and support with engineering, but the encouragement to get going on this. So what kind of content should you be expecting if you're going to listen to this podcast, and who's this for? Well, my initial plan is to share tips and tricks that will benefit any or all of the following audience. Okay, so this is going to meld a little bit together because there is some crossover in the tips. Sometimes tips that I share and insights that I share relate to a variety of different range of franchisors. But there's definitely going to be some tips for early franchisors that are either that have just started or they're starting and they're trying to figure out where to focus their time and energy. They may have that might be 1 or 2 units or might be 0 units, but trying to find that first franchisee. And also for franchisors that are a little further along, up to maybe even 30 or 40 units, that's sort of the range of clients that I tend to work with. And, when I work with my clients that have 20 or 25 units, I find that, when I talk about things that I'm doing with my clients that are at earlier stages, they often perk up and go, wait, we're not actually doing that. And, it's because I wasn't working with them when they were at that level and I didn't realize we hadn't checked back on that. And so there's things that they're learning and they're realizing, oh, shoot, we should probably implement that as well. So that's why it's such a range. I've really found that, there's possible learnings at all these different stages, and that I find the people that I work with are picking up those nuggets, even when I thought that they already knew things that they would have already known. So I'm confident that even if you're at like 100 units and up, especially when it comes to the leadership side of things and the soft skills and supporting franchisees, required, the requirements to foster a culture of compliance and performance, I'm confident there will still be some nuggets in here for you as well. So the topics that I am most passionate about and intend to cover include everything from, how to figure out the right candidates for your team, like who are the right candidates to try to attract to your franchise company as franchisees. And then how do you find those people? What about the franchise recruitment process, including how to set up a win-win situation from the start and, how to foster that right from the beginning, how to create buy-in with franchisees, how to fix messes. Often I get requested, to have a conversation with a franchisor who has 10, 20, 25, 30 franchisees, and they've got a bit of a mess in there somewhere. Anybody that's watching this that has those is probably laughing because pretty much everybody experiences it. And that mess might be anything from franchisees who are, disgruntled to maybe just franchisees that are disengaged and lukewarm and tying up a territory where you could be selling franchises and tapping into that market, but you've got somebody tying it up. So how do we fix that? How can we turn that around? How do we get them out without potentially having to spend a bunch of money on legal efforts? If we can, let's try to get them out with a more amicable separation that leaves everybody with a win-win situation. Also things like how to properly support franchisees, how to support them to foster a culture of performance. how to help them understand the economics of their business. A lot of franchisees come in because they're not as business savvy. They're looking for that support. And how can we do that best to really help them understand so that they're not like a deer in headlights when they look at their profit and loss statement and their KPIs. I can also see myself talking about how to figure out your brand foundation, including things like what are your core values, why are those important, how to figure out what your core values are, and how to infuse that through your whole organization to create alignment so that everybody is moving in the same direction, which creates efficiencies and happiness and joy and loyalty. In true Angela Coté style, it will be raw and real. Let me remind you or assure you, I'm an entrepreneur too, and I can relate to the ups and downs. So I'll share, the stories and the things that I go through on a daily basis and have gone through in the past, going through starting my own business as a franchise growth catalyst, and also sharing stories from my upbringing with M&M Food Market. So that's actually a perfect segue right now into my backstory. So if we haven't met before, or you haven't heard any of my interviews that I've been interviewed in or videos, you might not know that I grew up with the company called M&M Food Market, which is formerly M&M Meat Shops, which, a little secret for you, originally was called M&M Meat Shops, Meats and Fixins. And it's a company that my parents started back in 1980 and grew over the years to almost 500 locations through franchising. So I had the pleasure of dressing up as a kebab, Kelly Kebab for that matter, at grand openings because it was and is a retail frozen food chain. And so I got to dress up as Kelly Kebab at grand openings and hand out, samples to kids and hand out balloons, helium balloons, and sometimes even suck the helium of the balloons, which maybe that explains a lot about who I am now and how I sound. I don't know. But, it was a great exposure to how to really tap into a local community. All those grand openings that I attended, everything from, I guess, dressing up as a kebab to having the job of separating burgers for the barbecue. We had a charity barbecue at these events. And back in those days, we actually gave away the burgers for free and asked for a minimum donation of 50 cents, but it wasn't required. So yeah, you can imagine we had lots of, homeless people and people that were a little bit down and out coming and getting a free lunch. But you know what? That was all part of giving back to the community. That's how we saw it. And it still created a buzz. And that led to, newspapers coming out and covering it and getting free PR. So, all in the end worth it, right? You just look at it as a marketing cost. So that's the early days. I had the privilege or advantage of getting to work in our corporate store, working side by side with the franchisees who were being trained in the corporate training, and sometimes getting a little bit of an opportunity to train them on certain aspects of the business when I was just a teenager. And then when I finished university, going out to Western Canada to work for our area developer for Western Canada, for M&M Food Market, and working as initially a field trainer. So what I would do is go and set up the store and get the franchise location set up and running and train the franchisees and train the staff that they had hired and help them get their ordering done and make projections for what we were going to do for grand opening. And you can only imagine, as a young female boss's daughter showing up, hi, these older male franchisees that had invested $400,000, which was likely their life savings. Hi, I'm here to help you run your business and train you how to do it and train you how to be profitable and successful. And so you can only imagine, I got hit with a lot of adversity and resistance. And I was like, well, I've got my business degree, but, they're thinking, what risk have you ever experienced? And what do you really know about running a business? So I learned a lot about what doesn't work as a franchise field support person, and had to then learn how to create buy-in and how to establish credibility and how to, win these franchisees over to help them grow their business and have them listen to me and work with me as a partner, in their business. And that led to me doing some work in more of a field consulting role, which was the name of it back then. These days, typically called a franchise business coach. And so I would work with them on, projections for budgeting and business planning, how to grow business in their local community, how to motivate their staff, foster that culture of compliance so that they would follow the systems. So that was wonderful exposure for me and experience to the world of franchising. I probably learned the most about franchising ever from that role. I did skip over. I did work in the corporate office for a number of years on and off as well before I went out in the field. So I was able to implement some of the things that I kind of worked on in the corporate office and then go out in the field and see firsthand, what was really going on out there. Anyway, in 2000, I became a multi-unit franchisee of M&M Meat Shops. It was still called at the time. And opened 3 locations in about a year and a half. We set some records for sales. And while I'd like to take all the credit for that, part of the reason for the wild success that we had was because we opened store number 300. And then ultimately we opened store number 319 and 327, a year and a half later. And the market was just really ready. And this goes to show the value of a brand and the value of franchising. Now, that's not to say we didn't, have to go build business in our local community. We sure did over the years. We had to get out there. We had to keep people coming back. We had to give them great service. We had to do things to get in front of our customers locally and, stay on their radar and stay in front of them. And this is something that I talk a lot about I don't just talk about, I help my franchisor clients really instill into their corporate culture and into their franchisee culture is that franchising, the beauty of it is you've got local franchisees in the markets that they live with the opportunity to go out and build business in their local community. And I find it to be one of the number one complaints I hear from franchisors, whether that's my clients or people that I meet at conferences or get on calls with. They're all looking for 2 things, really. One is, how can I get more franchisees, which I'll talk about in a minute, and how can I get my franchisees more profitable? And I think what, they say, one of the biggest areas that they see and I see is that a lot of franchisees are not maximizing that opportunity to grow their business in their local community. And I believe the reason for that is because it wasn't set up initially that was going to be a big part of what they need to do, and or not bringing in the right people or maybe not supporting and guiding them the way that they need to be. And there are ways to do that. So I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole right now because it's something I'll save for another podcast. But it's something that I got to experience firsthand, both in the field in the late 90s for a few years, and then in the shoes of a franchisee, how important it was to make some serious effort to be staying in front of the customers and the potential customers. I've had somebody say to me once, or not just once, more than once, I've had people say to me, didn't people just come? Like, they know the brand. It's an iconic Canadian brand. Everybody knows it. Everybody loves it. But even though people love the brand, doesn't mean they're going to put on the brakes and, turn into your parking lot and come and shop at your store. We had to continuously stay on top of those efforts to stay top of mind for our consumers. So that is something that's ingrained in me and that I talk a lot about. And I really try to help my clients and their franchisees with. So along the way, after becoming a franchisee and working in that, not working, but owning my own stores for a number of years, it started to feel like I needed to do something for myself. And so I actually hired a career coach and did some work and some strengths finding and soul searching and networking. And, I was trying to kind of do something different. I thought, let's get away from the franchise world for now. And if I find myself back there at some point, fine, but let's just see what else is out there. And I spent some time, networking with different communities in my local market. And while I was out networking, I just found that I kept getting asked the same question along the lines of, my friend is thinking about franchising their business. Would you go meet with them? for coffee. They want to understand what's involved, or my friend has started franchising their business and they're really stuck. They can't understand or figure out what to do next. They've spent a lot of money already. Would you go meet with them and give them some advice? And so the more I did this, the more I realized that there was an opportunity for this in the market, and that I could use the skills and unique talents that I had acquired over time and my perspective. So I could use that to help people that are trying to franchise their business or stuck somewhere along the way. So I came up with the term, with the help of another coach and brand strategist, the term franchise growth catalyst. I realized early on that the term franchise consultant implied that I was doing franchise sales, which wasn't really my plan. And I did have people saying at that time, I will tell you, that I had a lot of mental roadblocks about it, because I had people saying to me, early franchisors don't have any money. They're not going to be able to afford to pay you what you're going to need to be paid. I also had people saying that there's a lot of people already out there doing that. And I even had my own voices in my head saying that, like, why would someone hire me? So I started out on the sort of smaller level thinking, okay, well, I'll just see if I can find a few people and see if this is sort of a thing. Because we still had our stores going at the time. And I thought, okay, my kids are a little bit older now. I can contribute to the family income. I'll start doing this. And so I started on the smaller side, but as I went along, and hopefully this is inspiring to people listening, I started to realize that it wasn't about being completely different and having to put myself out there as this whole different thing. It was more that I was just being authentic about how I was doing things and being honest and real and using my expertise. And then I started, creating content and putting myself out there through an e-newsletter back then and various ways. And I had to get over the hurdle that I thought that I needed to be super original, have content that nobody else had. It was more about me making personal connections with people, building relationships, and then having the content so that they could look at who was Angela Coté, or who is Angela Coté, and ensuring that I understood what I was talking about. So that was more than anything, I guess, to establish credibility, putting out content and showing up at various franchise conferences all over North America. So that's really kind of what led me to now. Just a quick side note, we've since sold our stores, our M&M Meat Shop stores, and my husband's on to his next best thing. And my dad actually sold the company to private equity about 6 years ago. So we still had our stores for about 4 or 5 years of that, which was interesting. It was a great opportunity to experience the transition from, the original owner, who was the visionary behind the company, to a leadership team that was hired by the private equity company. So that was an interesting experience for sure. Gave me more great perspective that I can speak about when I'm working with my clients. So that's where I'm at now. I've had a lot of, I feel very fortunate. I've had a lot of amazing mentors come into my life, or, that I've reached out to, have been willing to help me. People that see what I'm doing. And, I think one of the things that I'm doing that's different than some of the other people out there that are doing, the similar kind of work, where they're helping people figure out whether franchising is a fit for them, or they're helping people along through franchising. I think one of the differences for me is that I'm really trying to bust the myth that franchising is turnkey. And by that, what I mean is franchising a business seems like it would be relatively straightforward. Now, anybody that's listening to this that has done it is probably laughing, because if you think back to when you first started, I'm guessing you were probably thinking something along the lines of, okay, I've got a profitable business, or I might have a few locations of a profitable business. You might have 3. It might be, whether that's bricks and mortar, or it might be one big territory that you're servicing. It might be property services that are like mobile business services. I've got this profitable business, and I want to grow, and I don't want to take on more debt. So I'm going to find franchisees, people in local markets who want to help grow this business. And these franchisees will invest the money to grow the business. And they will love, because they've decided to invest, they must love what I'm doing. So they will follow the systems. So I'm sure if you're a franchisor and you've got, at least a few franchisees, you're probably laughing right now because you've probably thought that and realized that that didn't actually happen, because there's so much more to it than that. And I want to point out the other reason that I hear all the time, why people want to franchise their business is because they get asked by their clients or their friends and family, hey, are you franchising this? I might consider this. And so they're looking at it and going, well, I've got demand. It seems easy, relatively easy. I've had many people say to me, I feel like this is a more passive way to grow my business rather than growing corporately. So I'm trying to help them understand that there's so much more involved than, just finding franchisees and the support side of things is a really big deal. And then also finding the right franchisees. I'm also trying to bust the myth that being a franchisee is turnkey. I never liked that, especially when I was the female boss's daughter showing up, as I mentioned before, to help the franchisee get up and running. Notice the word help. The goal wasn't to send the field staff in to do everything, and the franchisee literally walks up the day we open, turns a key, and turns on the lights, and business shows up. As a franchisee, there's a lot of hard work involved. And when we would meet the franchisees, the field team, we would say, okay, we have guided them in advance for hiring their staff and ordering the things that they needed to order. And so they were doing that work. We were just guiding them. So that's why it gets called turnkey. But when we got there, we'd be that first week there before we opened, before we had a soft opening, we'd be doing everything from like assembling the barbecue to hanging the pictures on the wall to inserting shelves into the freezer, which wasn't turned on yet, thank goodness. And we had times where, the freezer wouldn't get to the right temperature and we had $30,000 to $50,000 worth of product in there. And it would have been at the right temperature, but then it goes up. And so the franchisee, when they were under the impression it was turnkey, we actually had franchisees saying, well, this is turnkey. You're going to stay and wait, right? Like in the night till 2 a.m. or whatever it is until the freezer gets cold, or, deal with the freezer company. And it was like, no. It's your franchise. It's your business. We're here to support you. So that turnkey analogy or theory just, bit us in the back, more times than we wanted to as field support. And I think, it was easy for the salesperson to call it that, but the actual field team felt it and thought, if these franchisees had come in with more clear expectations of, what's expected of them, then this would have all been off to a better start. So I like to talk a lot about, busting that myth and about what the DNA of a franchisee is. There's a podcast interview I've been interviewed on by Social Geek Radio on the DNA of a franchisee, as well as the Franchise Rising podcast, similar topic. I have a white paper on it. If you're interested, I'm happy to send that to you. And I think it helps a lot when you understand what you're looking for. But anyway, I'm starting to digress here. So that is, I wanted to give you a sense of, the way that I think and my mentality about franchising, having lived and breathed, I call it my F3 advantage, the franchisor experience, the franchisee perspective, and then my time in the field, field support experience as well. And having lived and breathed deeply in all those areas is really, I think, where I've learned. Well, obviously, not just I think, it's definitely where I've learned as much as I've learned. And so I'll just sort of review the two main areas that I help people, because I thought this might be a good starter podcast for people that also are asking me, like, what do you do? How do you help people? So I want to answer those two questions. So what I do is in two main areas. I sort of said it before, but just to really be clear, I help very early franchisors navigate where to spend their time, money, and energy to get their franchise off the ground, and or even assess whether they should be franchising. So If they come to me and they haven't started yet, that's even better. So we can go through the criteria. But if they've started and they've started to invest in franchising, then I'll still help them assess whether it makes sense to go forward, because there's probably a ton more money that needs to be invested to get the franchise to where it needs to go. If they've started and they're further along and they're maybe considered an emerging franchisor, which the jury is out on what that really means. But, I'll just say they've got more than a few franchises operating, then I can help them, or I do help them, I should say, tighten up their franchise lead gen efforts and their franchise recruitment processes so that they can attract the right candidates to their team. And I'll help them tighten up their support systems so they foster a culture of compliance and performance. So how I do this is through one-on-one coaching and advising. And that can be anything from me coaching and guiding and being like a business partner with the franchisor and helping them think through how they're supporting the franchisees and why the franchisees aren't compliant, and like brainstorming that as a neutral third party with my franchise background. It may be that, so maybe me having conversations and strategy sessions with the franchisor themselves, or sometimes it might include me getting in front of the franchisees and having either one-on-one conversations or monthly workshops with the franchisees, or whatever's needed. We look for that area, and I get in there and help use this perspective that I've got, my F3 advantage, to help figure out what's going on, and then make recommendations on what needs to change, help implement that going forward. In terms of the franchise recruitment and lead gen efforts, how that's come about is I've worked with a number of clients, in the past 4 or so years. And what I've noticed is they often come to me because they've got franchisees that aren't compliant or that they're not maximizing the opportunity. And the problem doesn't usually start there. It usually starts from the franchise recruitment process. Everything from who you attracted in to the expectations you set up during the franchise recruitment process. So as I continued to work with people, I realized more and more that I needed to really get clear on what people were missing in the franchise recruitment process. So I spent a lot of time, money, and energy of my own. And if you've known me for a while, you'll know that I attend a lot of franchise conferences. I do that not only for the prospecting and meeting new clients and the networking with the franchise world, but also for the education. So I've really made sure that I've balanced my time to not just, learn about or validate what I know about franchisee support, but also to work to learn more about what are the best practices in franchise recruitment and what are people doing? What are the modern approaches, so that I can teach that to my clients and make sure that we're starting out right from the start. So if I'm working with somebody who already has some problem franchisees, we can do both. We can work on potentially turning these franchisees around, or if we need to help them get out of the system, or we can work on, the front end stuff. I guess I'm kind of doing that backwards. I'm using my hands right now as I speak. If you're listening to this, that won't make sense. But I'm, also working on the front end with making sure that we bring in the right candidates and how to know they're the right candidates. How can we know that? I mean, we never know 100%, but there's definitely a lot of things we can do to surface the red flags. So I have a whole process that I can teach where we can look at it and compare notes to what you're currently doing and see if we can find some areas to tweak and gaps that maybe haven't been thought of to really refine that. So it's typically one-on-one coaching and advising that I do. That can be in an ongoing, longer-term relationship or sometimes project-based. I've got a few options there. However, I can't forget to mention how much I love the opportunity to share my insights and facilitate sessions at franchise company conferences. This actually stemmed from teaming up with a colleague and friend named Justin Waltz, who created a process called an innovation storm and wrote a book about it called Disrupt from Within, which includes information as well on franchise performance groups, which I'm also a huge fan of and love to help people figure out and implement. But long story short, if you're looking for something lively and collaborative for your, getting your franchisees fired up and aligned at your next franchise conference, reach out to me and we can chat about whether these sessions might be a fit for your next conference. This can apply to whether there are 10 franchisees or 100. So that is that's what I do. I work ongoing with people, coaching and advising, and I also do interactive sessions as well as presentations to teach bigger groups. So on that note, lastly, I'll just share examples of clients I've worked with. I've worked with bricks and mortar and mobile service businesses, everything from I'm working with a hormone weight loss center, influential multicultural childcare center who's doing really well. I'm super excited to be working with kids coding franchises and even a cat hotel, which you may know because I talk about it a lot on my social media. I've worked with salons, fitness franchises, tutoring, lawn maintenance, painting. When it comes down to it, it's really not about me being an expert on the type of business. It's me being an expert on franchising, and let's apply that to your business. So hopefully that provided some value and inspires you to think differently about what you're doing and maybe inspires you to have a conversation with me. I am very approachable and non-invasive in my initial calls with people. I'm happy to just get on a call and share some insights up front and talk about whether it's a fit. This podcast is not at all meant to be a sales pitch. So that is not what this is about. But if that did inspire you to want to have a conversation, I'm here for you. Otherwise, stay tuned for episode number 2. I haven't even made a plan yet for what that's exactly going to be. But I have lots of great ideas and I'm sure it will be worth your time. So stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, as always, go be awesome.
Copyright 2020, Angela Coté Inc. All rights reserved.